Maya Thompson wasn't supposed to be in this situation. She wasn't supposed to be standing here, waiting for her next table to arrive, and certainly not dealing with the consequences of an unexpected decision. But life had a funny way of throwing curveballs. It was just another regular Thursday night at the Palms, a trendy restaurant tucked away in the heart of New York City. The kind of place where the food was overpriced, but the atmosphere was undeniably chic. Maya had been working there for over 2 years, long enough to know the routine like the back of her hand. The usual guests, the demanding ones, the tips that could make or break your week, and of course, the constant hum of gossip that buzzed in the back of the kitchen. But tonight, the place was different. There was an energy in the air, thick with tension that Maya couldn't shake off. Maybe it was the surprise VIP reservation that had everyone talking, or maybe it was because the diner was filled to the brim with political figures and socialites, all buzzing about some new story. Maya had heard whispers of it, something about an event involving President Trump, but she wasn't too concerned. She had her own worries to focus on. Maya had grown up in Queens, where life wasn't easy and dreams didn't always come true. She worked hard, kept her head down, and tried to make the best of her circumstances. This job, though it wasn't glamorous, gave her a chance to pay the bills and, more importantly, helped her save for a future she dreamed of outside of waiting tables. The problem was, the job itself wasn't as easy as it seemed. That night, when the man in the sleek suit walked in, Maya couldn't have known how much her life was about to change. He wasn't a familiar face, definitely not one of the usual patrons, and his confidence oozed off him like an expensive cologne. He slid into a corner booth, his eyes scanning the room with an air of authority. A tall, sharply dressed woman followed behind him, a soft smile plastered on her face. They looked like the kind of people who could change your life in an instant. The hostess led them to the table and Maya, her section of course, was the one to approach. "Good evening," Maya said with her best smile, adjusting her apron. "Can I start you off with something to drink?" The man looked up from his phone, glancing at Maya. His sharp eyes seemed to take in everything about her in a split second. Maya's stomach twisted. She'd gotten used to being judged, but there was something unsettling about the way he stared. He was different, familiar, but not in a way she liked. "I'll have a whiskey on the rocks," he said, voice deep and commanding. "Of course," Maya nodded, jotting down the order. "And for you," she turned to the woman beside him. "I'll have the same," she replied. Maya walked away, shaking off the weird feeling in the pit of her stomach. She couldn't put her finger on it, but something about this table felt off. The night progressed as usual, but the man at table 5 didn't stop watching Maya. Every time she passed by, his eyes followed her. Not in a creepy way, but like he was analyzing her every move, evaluating her in a way that made her nervous. Maya tried to focus on her work, but the feeling stuck with her, growing stronger as the night went on. Then, it happened. Maya was busy running drinks to another table when she heard her name being called. "Excuse me, miss," the man from table 5 said, his voice firm but calm. Maya turned to him, trying to mask her discomfort. "Yes, sir. Is everything all right with your meal?" she asked. "I'm good. Actually, I wanted to ask you a question," he began, his eyes narrowing just slightly. "I couldn't help but notice something. You don't look like most of the people here tonight. You don't seem to fit in. So tell me, why do you work here?" Maya blinked, caught off guard. She was used to some odd comments, but this one felt personal, too personal. Her mind raced. She could feel the other patrons around her watching, though they tried not to look too obviously. "Well, Maya started, her mind spinning. Was he trying to be rude? But then she caught herself. Maybe he wasn't being judgmental. Maybe he was just curious. "I just work here to make ends meet," she said, trying to keep it short and simple, but it felt like an understatement. "I'm saving up for a future. It's not forever, you know?" The man nodded slowly, his lips curling into a small smile. "Saving up for a future," he repeated, seemingly amused. "That's good. You know, I think you're a lot smarter than most people in this room. You've got potential." Maya blinked again, unsure how to react. "Thanks," she said, but before she could turn away, he added something that stopped her in her tracks. "You've got guts. I like that. So, I'm going to offer you something," Something that could change your life. Maya felt her heart skip a beat. What was going on? What was he talking about? She glanced around the room, suddenly aware of all the eyes on her. He leaned in, his voice lowering. I know you're probably not interested, but I'm a supporter of Trump. I'm sure you've heard about the event coming up in a few days. I'd like you to be a part of it. Help me out. Assist me during the dinner. There's a lot of money involved, and I think you could do something really special with it. Maya froze. Her mind raced, but her gut churned with a sense of dread. She'd never considered herself political, and the idea of helping someone connected to Trump was complicated, to say the least. But the thought of extra money, of being noticed, was tempting. It was just one night, right? Let me think about it, Maya finally said, unsure of what to say or do. The man smiled again, but this time it was almost like he knew something she didn't. Take your time, he said, but remember, opportunities like this don't come often. As Maya walked back to the kitchen, her thoughts swirled. She had no idea what she was getting into, but she felt a strange pull, an invisible force pushing her toward something that could either make or break everything she had worked for. She didn't know it then, but that decision was about to change everything. What would you do if you were faced with a decision that could change your life forever? Would you take the risk? Leave a comment with your thoughts. Maya Thompson wasn't the type to make impulsive decisions. She had learned early on that life didn't hand out second chances, and for a girl growing up in Queens, New York, second chances were something you had to work for, fight for, even. Her earliest memories were of a small apartment in a working-class neighborhood, where her mother, Karen, did everything she could to provide for Maya and her younger brother, Malik. Karen was tough, a woman who worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. But underneath the tough exterior, Maya knew her mother was a dreamer, a woman who longed for a better life but couldn't quite break free from the suffocating grip of everyday struggles. Maya had always admired her mother's strength. Karen had raised her children alone after Maya's father walked out when Maya was only 5. He'd left without a word, without a trace, and never came back. It was a wound that never healed for Maya, one that shaped her perspective on love, loyalty, and trust. Her mother, though, never spoke ill of him. She just worked harder and harder, pouring every ounce of her energy into providing for her children. Maya had learned that silence, while often painful, could sometimes be the most powerful tool. Growing up, Maya always felt like the adult in the room. Her mother's burdens weighed heavy on her, and as the oldest child, Maya was often the one to soothe her younger brother when he would cry about their father's absence. She would tell him stories of a father he would never meet, stories that she had invented because she didn't want him to feel the same emptiness she had. She was protective, and because of it, she often put her own feelings aside. As Maya grew older, she became determined to be something more than what her environment suggested she could be. She was a natural at academics, excelling in school despite the chaos of her home life. She dreamed of becoming a lawyer, someone who could fight for the underdogs, someone who could make a difference. But dreams like that seemed far-fetched when you were stuck working double shifts as a waitress just to make rent. Her first job at the diner came when she was 18. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. The hours were long, and the tips were unpredictable, but she didn't care. It was a way out. She was determined to save up enough to attend college, even if it meant giving up a part of her youth to work. At the Palms, Maya quickly earned a reputation for being efficient, friendly, and intelligent, qualities that kept her regular customers coming back. She wasn't just another waitress. She was someone who remembered their names, their favorite drinks, and their families. She made an effort to connect with people, and it paid off in the form of bigger tips and better connections. But there was always something that gnawed at her. The thought that she was stuck. Sure, she was saving, but how long would it take to accumulate enough money to escape the life she'd known? How long would it take for her dreams to become more than just dreams? Her mother, Karen, had her own doubts about Maya's ability to leave. This place, it's too comfortable, she would say, her voice filled with concern. It's easy to get stuck here, Maya. People stay in their comfort zones because it's safe. But you can't afford to get comfortable. You have to fight for what you want. Maya understood her mother's fears, but she wasn't going to let herself become one of the people her mom warned her about. She had goals, and nothing was going to stop her from reaching them. Not even the crushing weight of her daily grind. But when the opportunity with that mysterious man at the Palms presented itself, Maya had been forced to confront a different kind of challenge, one she hadn't anticipated. She had always been a little skeptical of the world beyond her small circle. Politics, especially, were a foreign language to her. Growing up, her mother had been adamantly apolitical, focusing solely on survival and never on the ideologies of those in power. Maya had always felt the same. She wasn't involved in debates or protests. She just wanted to make enough money to build a better life. The world of politics, especially the divisive nature of American politics, seemed too distant from her everyday struggles. But now, standing in front of a man who had made a fortune in the political world, she was facing a decision that would drag her into that very world, whether she was ready for it or not. The more she thought about it, the more complicated it became. Her mind raced with conflicting thoughts. Was this man simply offering her a chance to make money, or was there more to his proposal than he was letting on? Could she afford to risk everything for an opportunity like this? Was it even worth it? Her mother's voice echoed in her head. You have to fight for what you want. But what exactly was it that Maya wanted? A chance at a better life? A future without the weight of constant worry? Or was she just craving the validation of being noticed, of being asked to help someone powerful, even if that someone came with a reputation she wasn't entirely comfortable with? The conversation at the table lingered in her mind for the rest of the night. At home, when Maya finally crawled into bed, her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend, Angela. Angela, girl, I heard some crazy stuff about the guy you were talking to tonight. You sure you want to get involved with him? I heard he's all about Trump. That's some serious baggage. Maya stared at the message. She hadn't told Angela about the offer yet, but it seemed that the whole world was already talking about it. She typed a reply, then deleted it, then typed it again. Maya, I don't know. It's complicated, but maybe it's my chance to get ahead. What do you think? There was a long pause before Angela's reply came through. Angela, you know I've got your back, but I don't know if you want to get mixed up in all that. Just be careful, okay? Maya sighed, tossing the phone on her nightstand. She knew Angela was right, but there was a part of her that couldn't ignore the pull, the opportunity that had landed in her lap. She closed her eyes and let the uncertainty wash over her. Tomorrow, she would have to make a decision. But tonight, she couldn't help but wonder, what would happen if she took that first step into a world she didn't fully understand? And what would it cost her? The following morning was uncomfortably still. Maya woke up to the hum of her phone buzzing on the nightstand. As the sunlight streamed in through the half-open blinds, she stretched, her body sore from the long hours at the Palms the night before. She rubbed her eyes, groggy from a restless sleep filled with swirling thoughts. The text from Angela the previous night had weighed heavily on her mind. She had tried to push the thought of the mysterious offer out of her head, but the man's words haunted her, lingering like a shadow she couldn't escape. You've got potential. She could almost hear them echoing in her thoughts. Her phone buzzed again, pulling her from her musings. It was a text from an unknown number. Unknown number, Maya, I trust you've had some time to think about our conversation last night. We're having a small gathering tonight at 8 p.m. I'd like to discuss the details further. I believe this could be very beneficial for you. Let me know if you're in. Her heart raced as she stared at the message. She hadn't replied to him yet, and now, here he was, reaching out again. The message was direct, almost urgent. She glanced at the time, 10 a.m. She had all day to think about it, but the truth was, she didn't know if she could wait. There was a pull to this offer, a curiosity that kept growing in her chest. Could this really be the break she had been working for? With a shaky breath, Maya typed her reply. Maya, I'm in. Where do I need to be? The reply came quickly. Unknown number, I'll text you the address. Don't be late. Maya sat up in bed, her thoughts racing. She felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down at an unknown future. She could take the leap, but what would happen on the other side? The whole thing felt strange, but there was an undeniable allure to the unknown. The entire day seemed to drag as Maya went about her usual routine. She tried to focus on getting ready for her shift at the Palms, but her mind kept wandering back to the evening ahead. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she knew one thing for certain. This was a moment she couldn't afford to ignore. As the hours ticked by, Maya found herself in front of her closet, staring at the few outfits she had to choose from. She hadn't exactly been preparing for a business meeting. She was a waitress, after all, but tonight, things had to be different. She picked out a sleek, black dress that she usually wore for special occasions. It wasn't too fancy, but it was polished enough for something important. At 7:30 p.m., Maya stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her hair and taking one last look at herself. Her reflection was a mixture of nerves and excitement. She wasn't sure what she was stepping into, but she had no choice now but to see it through. Her phone buzzed again, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was the address. Unknown number. I'll be waiting for you at 8. Don't disappoint me. Maya quickly typed a response. Maya, I won't. With that, she grabbed her purse, checked her makeup one last time, and headed out the door. Her heart beat a little faster as she walked toward the subway station. She had no idea what to expect, but the adrenaline coursing through her veins told her that she was ready for whatever came next. The subway ride felt like it lasted an eternity, though it only took 20 minutes. The city buzzed with its usual energy, horns honking, pedestrians rushing past, the clatter of subway doors opening and closing. Maya tried to settle her thoughts, but they were all over the place. Finally, she arrived at the address, standing in front of an upscale building that screamed wealth and influence. The kind of place that Maya only ever saw in magazines or on TV shows. The doors were glass, and she could see a receptionist sitting behind a desk, but no one was there to greet her. The building's sleek modern design seemed out of place, like it didn't belong in the gritty streets of the city Maya knew. She felt out of place already. Maya approached the desk, where the receptionist barely looked up as she spoke. I'm here for the meeting. Maya Thompson. Her voice came out a little shakier than she intended. The receptionist's eyes briefly scanned her. Follow me, was all she said. Maya was led through the hallways of the building, her footsteps echoing in the pristine, polished floors. She tried to calm her nerves, but each step felt heavier. She had to admit, she was nervous. What was she walking into? Who were these people? And why her? The receptionist stopped at a set of double doors, knocked twice, and opened them without waiting for a response. Inside, the room was spacious and minimalist, but luxurious. Dark wood paneling, a polished glass conference table, and a breathtaking view of the city. A few people were seated around the table, talking quietly. The man from the night before stood at the head of the table, his back to her as he looked out the window. Ah, Maya. Glad you could make it, he said without turning around. His voice was smooth, like someone who was used to getting what he wanted. Please have a seat. Maya hesitated but walked in and sat down at the seat indicated, her heart pounding in her chest. The room grew quieter as everyone's attention shifted to her. The man turned around, a smile playing on his lips. I'm glad to see you're taking this seriously. What you don't know yet is that this could be your opportunity to step into a much bigger world. But it's not for everyone. He paused, letting the words hang in the air, before continuing. You see, Maya, the world we live in is all about connections, about who you know and what you're willing to do to climb. I've got connections that could change your life overnight. All I need is someone like you, someone with drive, who knows how to get things done. Maya swallowed hard. There was something in his voice that unsettled her, but there was also something else, a part of her that couldn't help but be intrigued. This was it. This was the moment that could alter everything she'd worked for. But at what cost? The man smiled again. Are you ready to take the leap, Maya? Her hands trembled slightly as she clasped them together on the table. She didn't know the full extent of what she was about to get into, but she knew one thing for sure. Her life was about to change forever. Maya's mind was racing. She sat frozen in her chair, trying to process the weight of the situation unfolding before her. The man's smile was calm, almost too calm, as if he were testing her, watching for any sign of hesitation. The other people in the room, silent and still, had the same air of unspoken power. They were all part of something bigger, something she had no part in, at least not yet. You're probably wondering what it is exactly I'm offering you. The man continued, his voice smooth, almost hypnotic. It's simple. You have potential, Maya. You've shown you can handle pressure. You work hard. You know how to interact with people. That's something valuable in my world. Maya swallowed, trying to stay calm, but her pulse quickened. She had spent her whole life in the shadows, working hard just to stay afloat. And now, this stranger was telling her that all of that effort could finally pay off. But at what cost? Was there a price to pay for stepping into a world she didn't understand? The man leaned forward slightly, his eyes locking with hers. You've probably heard of my name, though you may not realize the full extent of my connections, he said, a small smirk playing at the corner of his lips. I can offer you opportunities that most people will only ever dream of. But here's the thing, Maya, he paused, letting the words sink in. This world I'm offering you is not without its risks. It requires loyalty, discretion, and a willingness to do what's necessary. Maya's heart skipped a beat. Loyalty? Discretion? What kind of world was she walking into? She had heard the rumors about powerful people like him. The way they played with the lives of others, the shady deals, the backdoor politics. But here she was, being offered a chance to join them. Could she trust him? Could she trust herself to make the right choice? Before she could speak, the man gestured to one of the other people in the room, a well-dressed woman in her 30s who had been sitting silently at the table. She stood up and walked over to Maya, placing a folder in front of her. The thick stack of papers was full of contracts and agreements, each more complex than the last. This is just the beginning, the woman said, her tone businesslike. If you decide to go forward, you'll be part of something much bigger than yourself. A network of power, influence, and yes, wealth. All it takes is a few small decisions, and we can change everything for you. But, like I said, it's not for everyone. Maya looked down at the folder, her mind racing. The documents in front of her were filled with legal jargon, terms she didn't fully understand. There were signatures, deadlines, and clauses she couldn't quite decipher. But one thing stood out to her. At the bottom of the last page, it read, Non-disclosure agreement required before proceeding. A non-disclosure agreement. It felt like a red flag to her, a warning that something wasn't entirely above board. But then again, everything she'd ever wanted in life had seemed out of reach. Now, an opportunity had presented itself, one that could pull her out of the depths of uncertainty and into a new world. The man noticed her hesitation. He leaned in slightly, his voice lowering. Maya, think about this. You've been working long hours, barely scraping by. But this, he gestured to the folder, to the people around the table, this could change all of that. You've got what it takes. You just have to take that first step. She felt a strange mix of excitement and dread. Was this what her mother had warned her about? The world was full of people who would use you, who would demand things from you that you weren't ready to give. But her mother had also taught her one important lesson. If you didn't take risks, you'd never get anywhere. Maya took a deep breath. And if I say yes, what happens next? She asked, her voice steadier than she felt. The man smiled again, that same confident, almost predatory smile. We move quickly. You'll start working with my team, helping to build connections and bring in the kind of influence that will set you up for life. But like I said, loyalty is key. You'll be expected to follow through, no questions asked. If you can do that, you'll be handsomely rewarded. The word rewarded hung in the air, tempting and dangerous at the same time. Maya knew she couldn't make this decision lightly. But she also knew that she couldn't afford to pass up an opportunity like this. I need time to think, she said, more to herself than to him. The man nodded slowly, as if he had been expecting this response. Of course, take all the time you need. But remember, time is money. Opportunities like this don't wait around forever. With that, the meeting was over. The others in the room filed out, leaving Maya alone with the man. He didn't make any move to leave, his eyes watching her intently as she stood up from the table. You'll be back, he said quietly, his voice almost a challenge. Because you know deep down, this is what you've been waiting for. Maya didn't answer. She simply walked out of the room, her heart pounding in her chest. The elevator doors closed behind her, and for the first time, she felt completely alone. The city outside seemed a world away as she stared at her reflection in the elevator mirror. What was she going to do? What would her life look like if she said yes? And if she said no, what would she be giving up? The decision weighed heavily on her, but there was one thing she knew for sure. This wasn't just any opportunity. This was a turning point, a moment that would shape her future. And she had no idea where it would take her. Maya spent the next few days caught in a whirlwind of uncertainty. Every time she closed her eyes, she could see the images of the meeting, the gleaming office, the confident man who spoke like he was used to getting what he wanted, and the enticing folder full of opportunities. But the more she thought about it, the more questions swirled in her mind. What kind of network had she been invited into? What would she have to do in exchange for the wealth and influence he promised? The non-disclosure agreement alone was enough to send a shiver down her spine. In her gut, she felt like there was something shady about the whole thing. But then again, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was the break she had been waiting for her whole life. Could she really turn it down? Her shift at the Palms had been uneventful, filled with the same routine. Serving tables, exchanging pleasantries with customers, and taking orders from a stressed-out kitchen. As Maya served a drink to one of her regulars, a man in his mid-40s with a friendly smile, he leaned in and struck up a conversation. "Hey, Maya, you look a little off today. Everything okay?" he asked, genuinely concerned. She offered him a tired smile. "Just a lot on my mind," she admitted. "You know, life stuff." "Yeah, I hear you. The weight of the world sometimes, huh?" He nodded, taking a sip of his drink. "You ever thought about doing something different? You've got a lot of potential, kid. Don't let life pass you by." Maya froze. Was he reading her mind? She'd never told anyone about the offer she'd received, but somehow, this stranger had pinpointed her internal struggle. She forced herself to smile, nodding slowly. "Thanks," she said quietly. "I'm trying to figure that out." The man gave her a sympathetic look, then leaned back in his chair. "Just remember, opportunities don't wait. When they come knocking, you've got to be ready. Don't waste your shot." As Maya walked away, her thoughts spiraled. Was this the universe telling her something? It felt like a sign, like the world was pushing her toward a decision she wasn't quite ready to make. Later that night, after her shift ended, Maya found herself standing on the balcony of her tiny apartment, staring out at the city lights. She had always loved the view. How the lights sparkled in the distance, how the city seemed alive, full of possibilities. But tonight, the view felt different. It felt distant, unattainable. The city was still bustling, but she felt like she was on the outside looking in. "What's stopping me?" she asked herself. "I've always played it safe, but look where that's gotten me. Stuck in the same place, always struggling to get by." Her phone buzzed on the table, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from the unknown number. "Unknown number, Maya, I just wanted to remind you that the window for this opportunity is closing. Let me know if you're in." The message felt like a final push, a nudge that was both reassuring and unsettling. There was no turning back now. She knew it was time to decide. But the weight of the decision was overwhelming. What would she be walking into? And what would she be leaving behind? Her mind raced with possibilities. Could she trust this man, this mysterious figure who seemed to hold the keys to a new world? Could she trust herself to handle the weight of that kind of power, the kind of influence that came with joining a network like his? Maya took a deep breath and closed her eyes. She thought back to her childhood, to the lessons her mother had taught her. In life, sometimes you have to take risks, but you have to be careful. Not every opportunity is as it seems. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. Her mother had been wise, maybe even too wise, too cautious. But Maya wasn't her mother. She had her own path to carve, her own choices to make. She grabbed her phone and typed a response. "Maya, I'm in. What's the next step?" Within seconds, the reply came. "Unknown number, I'll send you the details. Be ready." Her heart pounded in her chest. There was no going back now. She had made her decision. Now, it was time to step into a world she didn't fully understand. A world that promised everything she had ever wanted. But at what cost? Maya didn't know what would happen next, but as she stared out at the city one last time, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't even imagine. Maya's phone buzzed again just as she was slipping into bed. She had expected a response, but this was faster than she had anticipated. The screen illuminated in the darkroom, displaying a new message. Unknown number. The first step is simple. Meet me tomorrow at noon. You'll get all the details then. Her heart raced. It was real. This was happening. She couldn't believe she had actually agreed to it. But here she was, moving forward into an unknown world. The nerves she felt were like a storm inside her, but at the same time, there was excitement, a thrill that felt like the beginning of something monumental. She lay in bed for a while, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Thoughts kept spinning in her mind. What was she walking into? Who were these people? And why her? The next morning, Maya woke up early, still groggy from the restless night. She didn't have much time to second-guess herself. She had to leave soon if she wanted to make the meeting. As she got dressed, she tried to quiet the chaos in her mind, focusing on the task at hand. It was just a meeting. She had been to hundreds of them before, but this time felt different. She chose something simple but professional, a black blazer, a white blouse, and dark jeans. She couldn't decide whether she was dressing for success or for camouflage, but she didn't want to seem too eager. Too much emotion would make her seem weak. Maya didn't need that right now. When she arrived at the meeting place, a nondescript cafe on a quiet street in the city, she felt a rush of unease. It was the kind of place people met to discuss business discreetly, away from the public eye. As she walked inside, the hum of quiet conversation mixed with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, but Maya couldn't focus on any of it. Her eyes scanned the room, looking for the man who had made the offer. At the back of the cafe, a figure in a sharp suit sat alone at a table, tapping his fingers lightly on the wood. His back was to her, but she recognized him immediately. The confident posture, the same calculated air about him. He looked like someone who had everything under control. Maya approached cautiously, unsure of what to expect. She stopped at the table and he looked up, his lips curling into a smile as he motioned for her to sit. "Glad you could make it," he said, his tone smooth as always, as if everything was already settled. She sat down across from him, her heart pounding in her chest. "I'm here. What's next?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. He took a moment before responding, like he was savoring the moment. "Now, you prove you're ready for this life. You see, Maya, loyalty isn't something you can just say. It's something you have to show. And to show it, you need to make a choice. A real choice." Maya frowned. "A choice? What do you mean?" The man pushed a small, unmarked envelope across the table toward her. She hesitated before reaching for it, already feeling the weight of whatever was inside. "This envelope contains a name and an address," he continued. "It's someone we need to deal with. They've been causing problems, making waves where they shouldn't. If you want to be part of this, you need to handle it. You can either follow through, or you can walk away right now and forget this ever happened. The choice is yours." Maya stared at the envelope, her fingers hovering above it. She wasn't sure what she expected, but this was something she hadn't anticipated. This wasn't just about making connections. This was about something darker, something with consequences. "You want me to, what? Hurt someone?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man's smile didn't falter. "Not necessarily hurt, no. But you need to make an impression. Send a message. Do what you need to do to fix the problem. It's all part of proving your loyalty." Maya felt a cold sweat bead on the back of her neck. This wasn't the kind of world she had imagined. She had wanted to climb out of poverty, to find a way to live a better life. But this was a different kind of game altogether. A dangerous game. She could feel the eyes of the man on her, waiting for her response. He was testing her, and she had to make a choice. This was her first real test, the moment that would define everything that came after. What if she backed out? What would that mean for her? She'd be just another girl who couldn't handle the heat, who wasn't cut out for the world she had dreamed about. But what if she took the envelope? What if she did what they wanted? Could she live with herself after that? Maya swallowed hard, her hands shaking slightly. She had to make a decision, and quickly. Taking a deep breath, she finally reached for the envelope. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest as she opened it slowly. Inside, there was a name, Carter Blake. Her mind raced as she read the address on the card. It wasn't far from where she lived, just a few blocks away. She wasn't sure what she was supposed to do with this information, but one thing was certain: this was the first step. The man's voice broke through her thoughts. "You've made your choice. Now, do what needs to be done. We'll be watching." Maya stood up, the weight of the decision settling over her like a heavy cloak. She nodded without saying anything, trying to keep her composure as she walked out of the cafe. As she stepped onto the busy street, the air felt different. The world seemed to be spinning faster around her, and she realized just how far and over her head she really was. This wasn't just a new chapter, it was a new life, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for what came next. Maya stood on the sidewalk, the envelope still clutched tightly in her hand. The weight of it felt heavier than any object she had ever held before. It wasn't the paper or the ink. It was the responsibility, the decision it represented. She had crossed a line, and there was no turning back. The man's words echoed in her mind, "We'll be watching." She glanced at the address on the card again. It wasn't far, a few blocks away, just past the grocery store and down an alley she'd never really noticed before. Part of her wanted to just turn around, forget everything, and go home to her quiet life. But then, another part of her, the part that had longed for something more, urged her forward. She didn't know if it was fear or excitement that kept her moving toward the destination, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this moment was a defining one. She had asked for a way out, for a new life, and now it seemed that life was offering her something she couldn't ignore. As she walked through the streets, her mind raced. What was she supposed to do when she got to this address? The man hadn't given her any details, just the name, the address, and the expectation that she would handle things. Handle what? Who was Carter Blake, and why did they want him dealt with? The questions swirled in her head, each one making her more nervous than the last. She reached the alleyway, a dark, narrow path that led to a door at the far end. There were no signs, no distinguishing marks, just a plain wooden door with a faded number on it. 205. This is it, she thought. Her heart began to race again, pounding in her chest as if warning her to turn around. But she couldn't. She had come this far, and there was no turning back now. Taking a deep breath, Maya approached the door and knocked 3 times, the sound echoing in the stillness of the alley. Her palms were sweating, her legs shaking. She was terrified, but she couldn't afford to show it. Not now. The door creaked open, revealing a man who looked like he had stepped out of a crime novel. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a hard expression on his face, he looked her over briefly before stepping aside. "You the one they sent?" he asked, his voice gruff, not even bothering with a greeting. Maya hesitated for a moment, her nerves nearly choking her, but she forced herself to speak. "Yes, I was given the name and the address. I'm here to take care of business." The man raised an eyebrow, a slow smile spreading across his face. "You've got guts, I'll give you that." He gestured for her to enter. "Come on in." She stepped inside, feeling like she was walking into a different world. The air smelled faintly of cigarettes and whiskey. The dim lighting made everything look shadowy, like it was hiding secrets in plain sight. The room was small, with just a few worn-out chairs and a table in the center. On the table, a stack of papers lay neatly organized, as though they had been waiting for her arrival. "I'll need you to sign a waiver before we proceed," the man said. He handed her a pen and pushed the papers toward her. Maya stared at the document for a moment, her eyes scanning the fine print. It was vague, something about liability, about not holding anyone responsible for anything that might happen. The details were purposely blurry, but the implication was clear. Whatever happened here today, she was on her own. Her heart pounded in her chest. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't thought through the consequences. Her life had always been safe, predictable. Sure, it had been hard. She had struggled, worked too many hours for too little pay, but she had always known where she stood. But now, this? She didn't know where she stood. She didn't know what this world was about, and she was starting to realize just how dangerous it could be. Maya could feel the tension in the room as she held the pen. The man was watching her, waiting for her to sign. Is this it? She wondered. Is this the moment I lose myself? She thought about her family, her dreams, everything she wanted to escape. She thought about the people she had loved, the people she had let down, the people she had lost. She thought about all the times she had wished for something bigger, for something that could give her more than this life could offer. But did she really want to give up everything she had left of herself for this? She drew in a shaky breath, holding the pen above the paper. Every part of her screamed to run, to get out before it was too late. But another part, a darker part, urged her forward, telling her that this was the only chance she might ever get. The man's voice cut through the silence. You in, or you out? Maya swallowed hard, the weight of the decision sinking in. There was no turning back now. She had to make a choice. With one final deep breath, she signed the waiver, her hand shaking as the pen moved across the paper. The man smiled, a look of approval in his eyes. Good. Now let's talk business. As the man grabbed the papers and set them aside, he motioned for Maya to sit in one of the worn chairs. His demeanor had shifted slightly, from the calm indifference of a businessman to the cold intensity of someone accustomed to control. Maya could feel the air grow heavier, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. Let's get to the point, he said, his voice taking on an edge. You're here because you made a decision, a choice. And now, I need to see if you're really ready for this life. It's not about words. It's about actions. So here's your task. Maya sat down, her hands gripping the edge of the chair. She had no idea what he meant, but the uncertainty gnawed at her. The man leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. You think you can just walk into this and take what you want? There's a cost, Maya. It's time to pay it. He handed her a small, black notebook that looked worn but important. As she held it in her hands, he continued. Inside this notebook are names, people we need to deal with. These are individuals who have crossed the wrong people. They're either a threat to us or an obstacle. Your job, should you choose to accept it, he paused for emphasis, is simple. You need to deliver a message to one of them. And I don't mean a polite conversation. I mean, you show them exactly what happens when they step out of line. Maya's stomach churned. The gravity of what he was asking hit her like a wave. This wasn't just about networking or making money. This was about intimidation, control, power. The things she had never wanted to be involved with. She opened the notebook, flipping through pages filled with names, addresses, and brief descriptions of each person's offense. But one name caught her eye. Carter Blake. Her heart skipped a beat as she stared at it. The very name from the envelope. You're not just handing out messages, Maya. You're sending a clear signal that you're one of us now, the man said, almost reading her mind. When you take care of business, we'll know you're serious. You'll have proved your loyalty. Fail to do this, and you'll never get another chance. Maya's mind raced. This wasn't just a simple favor, a minor errand. This was a test of loyalty, of character, of who she was willing to become. She stared down at the page, at the address, and felt something shift inside her. I can't go back now. This is it. I either do this or lose everything I've worked for. But what if I can't do it? The man's voice broke through her thoughts. Time's ticking, Maya. Make your choice. She wanted to run. She wanted to throw the notebook on the table, walk out, and never look back. But as her mind flashed to the life she had, struggling, barely getting by, she felt a surge of anger, a fire that had been smoldering inside her for years. Maybe this was the only way out. Maybe this was her only shot at taking control. Her fingers trembled as she closed the notebook, making a decision in that moment. I can do this. I have to do this. I'll do it, she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. But I want to know exactly what I'm dealing with. Who is Carter Blake, and why is he a problem? The man raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. Smart. You don't just follow orders blindly. I like that. He paused, then pushed a small folder across the table. Maya opened it, revealing a photograph of Carter Blake, a man in his early 40s, dressed in a suit, with sharp features and a confident smile. The description below read, Carter Blake, businessman, known for underhanded dealings, trying to expand into our territory. He's been making moves that threaten our operations. Needs to be reminded of his place. The man leaned back in his chair. Blake is dangerous, but he's also ambitious. He's been trying to step into our territory for months now. He thinks he can outsmart us, play by his own rules. He needs to know that that's not how this works. Maya nodded slowly, her mind swirling with the implications. She had no idea who Carter Blake really was, but from what she was reading, he was a threat to the people who had pulled her into this world. The very same people who now expected her to deliver a message. "How do you want me to do it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, the reality of the situation sinking in. The man's gaze hardened. "You'll go to him. You'll remind him who controls this city. You'll make sure he knows that stepping on our turf is a mistake. How you do it is up to you, but you need to be firm. No mistakes." Maya swallowed hard, the weight of his words pressing down on her chest. She was being asked to confront a man who had made his own reputation in the business world, and she wasn't sure what kind of retaliation he would bring. But she knew one thing. She couldn't back out now. This was her test. This was her chance to prove she belonged. As she left the room, the man's final words echoed in her mind. "Remember, Maya, loyalty is earned. And once you've earned it, you never look back." Maya's heart pounded in her chest as she stepped out of the dimly lit room, the folder containing Carter Blake's details clenched tightly in her hands. The air outside was crisp, almost too cold, but it did little to calm her nerves. She had made a decision. There was no turning back now. Carter Blake wasn't just a name anymore. He was a target, and she was the one chosen to deliver the message. As she walked down the street toward Blake's office, her mind raced. She had never imagined herself in a position like this. Everything she had done up until now had been about surviving, working long hours, dealing with people who took advantage of her. But this was different. This was about power, control, and sending a message. Carter Blake was a businessman, someone who had clawed his way to the top with ruthless ambition. And now, Maya was being tasked with reminding him who really held the reins in this city. She didn't know how she was supposed to do it, how she was supposed to stand up to a man like him, but she was determined to go through with it. She couldn't afford to show any weakness. Blake's office building was sleek, modern, and impressive. It stood tall among the older, more weathered buildings surrounding it, a symbol of the wealth and influence Blake had cultivated over the years. Maya stood outside for a moment, looking up at the glass windows, trying to steady her breath. She could already feel the weight of the decision she had made pressing against her chest. What if he doesn't take me seriously? What if he fights back? Her thoughts were interrupted as she entered the building and made her way toward the elevator. She barely noticed the receptionist's glance as she stepped inside the elevator and pressed the button for the top floor. The elevator ride was silent, but Maya could feel the tension in the air, as though the space around her was holding its breath. When the elevator doors finally opened, she stepped out into a sleek, polished lobby. The receptionist at the front desk barely looked up as she approached, her focus on the computer screen in front of her. "I'm here to see Mr. Blake," Maya said, her voice steady but her nerves beginning to bubble to the surface. The receptionist glanced up, her eyes briefly assessing Maya. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked, her tone polite but impersonal. Maya hesitated for a moment. "No," she replied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "But tell him Maya is here. He'll want to see me." The receptionist raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical, but picked up the phone. After a brief conversation, she hung up and gestured for Maya to follow her. "Mr. Blake will see you now," she said, her tone not quite welcoming but not dismissive either. Maya followed the receptionist down a long corridor, the walls adorned with tasteful artwork and soft lighting. They stopped in front of a large wooden door, the kind that belonged to someone important. The receptionist knocked once before opening it and ushering Maya inside. Carter Blake's office was everything Maya had expected: modern, luxurious, and intimidating. Blake himself stood by the large window, staring out at the city skyline. He was tall, with dark hair and a confident air about him, dressed in an impeccably tailored suit that only added to his aura of power. "Ms. Maya," he said without turning around, his voice smooth but clipped. "I've been expecting you." Maya felt a wave of unease wash over her, but she forced herself to stand tall, meeting his gaze. She couldn't afford to show any fear. "I've heard a lot about you," Blake continued, finally turning around to face her. His smile was cool, almost knowing. But I don't think you understand just what kind of game you're playing here. I understand more than you think, Maya replied, her voice steady, though her heart was pounding. And I'm here to make sure you understand something as well. This city isn't yours to control, Blake. There are consequences for stepping out of line. Blake raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. He stepped closer, studying her with a look that was both curious and slightly mocking. Is that so? And who exactly do you think you're speaking for? Who gave you this message to deliver? He took a step toward her, his presence imposing. Because I don't take kindly to threats, especially from people who don't know their place. Maya's fingers twitched at her sides, and she struggled to maintain her composure. This is it, she thought. This is the moment where I either back down or stand my ground. I'm here because you've crossed a line, Blake, she said, her voice growing stronger. And it's time someone reminded you that no one is untouchable. Blake's amusement faltered for a second, his eyes narrowing slightly. He seemed to weigh her words before his expression hardened again. You're either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish, he said, his voice dangerously low. But whatever this is, you should know that it's not going to end the way you think it will. Maya didn't flinch. She had made it this far, and she wasn't about to back down now. The only thing that matters is that you understand. If you don't, I'm not the only one you'll have to answer to. For a moment, there was silence between them, an almost palpable tension in the air. Blake stared at her, his gaze unwavering, before he finally spoke again. I'll take your message under consideration, he said, his voice colder now. But don't think for a second that this changes anything. I'm not afraid of threats, and I'm not afraid of you. Maya stood her ground, trying to keep the fear from showing on her face. We'll see about that. With that, she turned and walked out of his office, her heart still racing but her resolve stronger than ever. She had delivered the message. Now the ball was in Blake's court. But deep down, Maya knew that the real test was only just beginning. Maya barely made it back to her apartment before the weight of what she had just done hit her like a freight train. She closed the door behind her, leaning against it as she took deep breaths. Her hands were shaking, and her mind raced with the events of the day. She had gone in, faced one of the most powerful men in the city, and delivered a message that could have consequences she wasn't prepared for. She sank into the nearest chair, her mind replaying every moment in Blake's office. His cold demeanor, the way he had sized her up like she was nothing more than a pawn in his game. The confidence he exuded was intimidating, but Maya knew she couldn't let him see any weakness. But what if I was too bold? She thought. What if I just put myself on his radar in a way I can't handle? Her phone buzzed, breaking her from her spiraling thoughts. She glanced down at the screen, seeing a text message from an unknown number. You did well, Maya. Blake will be watching you now. Make sure you're ready for what comes next. Maya's stomach churned. She didn't need anyone to tell her that she was now in deeper than she ever thought possible. The message was clear. There were no easy outs, no, I'm sorry, moments where everything could go back to normal. She was playing in the big leagues now, and the stakes were higher than she could have imagined. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed again, this time with a call. It was the same unknown number. She hesitated but answered. Maya, a familiar voice said. It was the man who had sent her on the mission in the first place, the one who had welcomed her into this world of power and influence. I trust your conversation with Blake went well? Maya stood up, pacing the small apartment, her mind racing as she tried to process what had just happened. I did what you asked. I delivered the message. Good, the voice on the other end responded, the satisfaction in his tone almost palpable. Blake won't forget it. You made an impression, Maya, but that's just the beginning. You need to be prepared for what comes next. When you mess with someone like Blake, there are always consequences. Don't think for a second that this is over. Maya's throat tightened. She could hear the unspoken warning in his voice. Consequences. That word echoed in her mind, sinking in with the heaviness of its meaning. She had made a powerful enemy. She didn't know what Blake would do, but she knew it wouldn't be good. I'm ready, she said, her voice firm, though she could feel the unease bubbling inside her. What's next? There was a pause on the other end of the line before the man spoke again, his tone much more serious. Now you wait. Blake will make his move, and when he does, you'll need to act fast. Stay sharp, Maya. The game's just begun. Before Maya could respond, the line went dead. She stood there, staring at the phone in her hand, the weight of the conversation settling over her. She had no idea what Blake's retaliation would look like, but she could feel the tension building. It was only a matter of time before things escalated. Over the next few days, Maya tried to go about her normal routine, but everything felt different. Every shadow seemed darker, every passerby seemed to be watching her, and every unfamiliar face was a potential threat. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was always just a few steps behind her, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. She stayed in contact with the man who had brought her into this world, but each conversation was vague, full of cryptic warnings and reminders to stay alert. He wouldn't tell her exactly what was going to happen, only that Blake would make a move soon. It could be anything, he had told her. A business deal gone wrong. A message sent in a way you can't predict. Maya didn't know how to prepare for something like that. She was used to the small-scale problems of her old life. Late shifts, bills piling up, the occasional rude customer. But this was different. This was a world where power was everything, and she had just stepped into the middle of a battle she didn't fully understand. Then, one afternoon, as she was leaving work, Maya got the call she had been dreading. It was from an unknown number again, but this time, there was no cryptic message. No warnings. Just one simple sentence. Blake's made his move. You need to get out now. Her heart skipped a beat, and panic surged through her. She ran back into her apartment, slamming the door behind her. She had no idea what was happening or how Blake had retaliated, but she could feel it. The danger was closing in, and she had no idea how to stop it. She grabbed her purse and threw a few essentials inside. Her phone, some cash, a change of clothes. But as she turned to leave, she heard a noise outside her apartment door. Someone was there. Maya froze, her pulse racing. She had been so careful. She had made sure the blinds were drawn, the door locked. How could anyone have found her so quickly? She backed away from the door, her heart pounding. She had no idea who it was, but she knew it wasn't someone friendly. The feeling of being hunted was overwhelming. She was no longer just a bystander in a game of power. She was the target. A knock came at the door. "Open up, Maya," a voice called, calm and menacing. "We need to talk." Maya's mind raced as she tried to figure out her next move. What should I do? Should I open it? Should I run? She had no answers. The only thing she knew was that her world had just shifted once again. Maya's heart raced in her chest as the knock echoed through her apartment. The voice on the other side was calm, but there was an edge to it. An edge that sent a chill down her spine. "Open up, Maya," the voice repeated, this time with a hint of impatience. "We need to talk." She pressed her back against the wall, clutching her purse tightly. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her legs felt frozen in place. The man outside could be anyone. Someone sent by Blake, someone who had been watching her for days, maybe even someone worse. She had no way of knowing who they were or what they wanted. But one thing was certain. She couldn't afford to make a wrong move. For a moment, the knocking stopped. Silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. Maya held her breath, trying to listen for any signs of movement, any indication of what was happening outside. She peeked through the peephole on the door, but all she saw was the reflection of the dim hallway light. What do I do? Maya thought, her mind racing. If I don't answer, they'll probably break in. If I do answer, I'm walking into the unknown. Her fingers trembled as she considered her options. She could try to slip out through the back exit, escape while she still had the chance. But something told her that wouldn't be easy. Whoever was outside already knew where she lived. They wouldn't have come this far without planning for every possible outcome. As the silence stretched on, Maya's mind flashed back to her conversation with the man who had pulled her into this dangerous world. Blake will make his move, and when he does, you'll need to act fast. But she hadn't expected this. A knock at the door, a threat hanging in the air. Her phone buzzed again, startling her out of her thoughts. She quickly grabbed it from her purse and saw that it was another message from the same unknown number. "Maya, Listen carefully. This is your only warning. Don't open the door. Don't trust anyone right now. You need to leave. Now." Her heart dropped. She had been right all along. Whoever was outside wasn't there to help her. They were part of the danger closing in on her. The knock came again, louder this time, followed by a muffled voice that she couldn't quite make out. The tension in the apartment was unbearable. Every second felt like an eternity. Maya's mind raced as she quickly scanned the room. She could hear the muffled sounds of footsteps outside the door. Someone pacing, maybe waiting for her to make a move. She had to act, and fast. In a split-second decision, she dashed to the small closet in the corner of the room and grabbed a large coat. She pulled it over her shoulders, trying to quiet the frantic pounding in her chest as she moved toward the back exit. But before she could reach the door, the knock came again, followed by a louder thud this time. This is it. She had no more time to waste. With trembling hands, Maya grabbed her keys and opened the back window. The apartment building was small enough that she could climb down the fire escape to the alley below. She just needed to get away, far away. But as she stepped onto the fire escape ladder, she heard the door to her apartment slam open. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Maya," the voice called out from inside, its tone cold and menacing. "We can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way. Your choice." Maya didn't hesitate. She didn't think. She just moved. She scrambled down the fire escape, the metal rungs clanging beneath her feet as she descended faster than she ever had before. Her mind was focused entirely on getting away, on putting distance between herself and whatever was happening inside her apartment. Just as her feet hit the ground, she heard footsteps behind her. Someone was following her, and they were getting closer. "No, I can't let them catch me. Not now." She bolted down the alley, glancing over her shoulder only briefly to see a figure silhouetted against the dim light of the hallway. It was too dark to make out any details, but she could feel their eyes on her. She was running out of time, out of options. She had to lose them. The alley curved to the left, and Maya took the turn without thinking, adrenaline pumping through her veins. She didn't know where she was headed, didn't care. She just needed to keep moving. She rounded another corner, but as she looked up, she saw two more figures blocking her path. Panic surged through her body. She was trapped. One of the figures stepped forward, his face half hidden in shadow, but Maya could see the outline of a gun in his hand. Her breath caught in her throat. "Maya," the man said, his voice calm but laced with a cold intensity. "You should have stayed inside. You don't know what you're dealing with." She backed up slowly, eyes darting between the two men. "I have to get out of here." But there was nowhere left to run. "Stay back," she whispered, trying to sound confident, though her voice trembled. "I don't want trouble. Just let me go." But the man didn't listen. Instead, he stepped closer, the barrel of the gun glinting under the weak light of the alley. Maya's pulse raced as she glanced around desperately. There had to be a way out. Just then, a loud screech of tires echoed through the alley, and a car came into view, screeching to a halt just a few feet away. The man with the gun froze, and for a split second, Maya thought she had imagined the whole thing. But then the car door opened, and a familiar voice called out, "Maya, get in now." Without thinking, she ran toward the car, her legs burning with the effort. She heard a shout behind her, followed by a gunshot that missed by mere inches. She didn't look back. She dove into the car, slamming the door behind her. "Go, go, go," she shouted, as the car peeled out of the alley, tires screeching against the pavement. As they sped away, Maya glanced out the back window, watching as the men in the alley disappeared into the shadows. She was safe, at least for now, but she knew this was far from over. Blake had made his move, and now, Maya was deeper in the game than she had ever been before. Maya's heart was still racing, but the adrenaline had begun to fade, leaving behind a shaky unease she couldn't shake. The car sped through the city streets, and for a moment, it felt as though the world was moving in slow motion. Her mind replayed the events that had just unfolded, each moment more surreal than the last. The man in the front seat, the one driving, was someone Maya didn't recognize. His expression was serious, but there was a sense of urgency in his movements as he navigated the darkened streets. Maya glanced at the back seat where another figure sat, watching her with intense, unwavering eyes. "Are you okay?" the driver asked, his voice low but steady. Maya nodded quickly, even though she didn't feel okay. How could she? She had just been chased down an alley, nearly shot, and then rescued by two strangers who appeared out of nowhere. She didn't even know who they were or why they were helping her. But something in their eyes told her they weren't enemies. At least, not yet. "I'm fine," Maya replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But who are you? Why are you helping me?" The man driving the car looked at her for a moment, then turned his attention back to the road. "We don't have much time. We need to get you somewhere safe first, then we'll explain." Maya's mind raced. Somewhere safe? After everything she'd just been through, she didn't trust anyone. Not anymore. But there was something about the way he spoke, the confidence in his tone, that made her pause. Whoever they were, they seemed to know exactly what they were doing. The car took a sharp turn, heading into a quieter part of the city. The driver slowed as they passed through a heavily secured gate that Maya hadn't noticed until they were inside. The gates closed behind them with a soft, metallic clang, signaling that they were now sealed off from the rest of the world. Maya's eyes widened. Where had they brought her? The building in front of her was large and modern, with high walls and no windows on the ground floor. It looked like something out of a movie, like a high-security facility or a corporate headquarters. But it didn't feel like the kind of place someone would bring her to for safety. It felt more like a prison. "We're here," the driver said, stopping the car in front of a set of large, glass doors. Maya didn't move at first. She couldn't. The car had barely stopped when the back door opened, and the man who had been sitting there stepped out, holding his hand out to her. His face was unreadable, but his stance was firm, as though he expected her to comply without question. "Come on," he urged, his voice cold but not unkind. "We don't have time for this." Maya hesitated for a moment before she opened the door and stepped out, taking a deep breath as she looked around. The place felt cold, impersonal. Whoever had brought her here clearly had resources, and it was becoming more and more apparent that Maya was far from the only player in this game. They led her inside the building, through several hallways that seemed to stretch endlessly. The entire place felt sterile, like a facility that existed far outside the view of the public eye. Maya felt like a mouse in a maze, moving through corridors that twisted and turned with no sense of direction. Finally, they arrived at a door at the end of a long hallway. The man who had been driving turned to her. "Wait here," he said briefly, before knocking twice on the door. After a moment, a voice from inside called out, "Come in." The man pushed open the door and motioned for Maya to follow. She stepped into the room, her senses on high alert. It was a large, dimly lit office, with sleek modern furniture and a large desk that sat in the center of the room. The walls were lined with bookshelves and various electronic devices. The air was thick with the smell of polished wood and something faintly metallic. At the desk sat a woman, mid-40s, with short, dark hair and sharp, calculating eyes that immediately studied Maya the moment she entered. She didn't speak right away, just watched her with an intensity that was almost unsettling. "Sit," the woman said, gesturing toward a chair across from her. Maya took the seat, still trying to make sense of what was happening. The woman leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. "You've stirred things up, Maya," she said, her voice calm but heavy with meaning. "Blake doesn't like being challenged, and he doesn't take too kindly to being embarrassed. Do you understand the magnitude of what you've done?" Maya swallowed hard, trying to steady her nerves. She wasn't sure if the woman was an ally or just another player in a much larger game, but her gut told her that she needed to keep her wits about her. "I know I've made a mess," Maya replied, her voice shaking slightly, "but I had to do something. Blake, he's dangerous. I couldn't just let him keep getting away with it." The woman nodded slowly. "That's true. Blake has his hands in far too many pies, and he's not someone who can be reasoned with. But you have to understand, you can't just make moves like that and walk away unscathed. You've become a target, Maya, a very valuable target." "Who are you?" Maya asked, unable to hide the suspicion in her voice. "And why should I trust you?" The woman's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Maya felt like she was being scrutinized by someone who could see right through her. Then, the woman leaned forward slightly, her voice low but direct. I'm someone who's been trying to take Blake down for years. I've seen the destruction he's caused, the people he's hurt, and I've been waiting for the right person to come along. Someone with the courage to do what needs to be done. That's where you come in. Maya's mind was spinning. She had no idea who this woman was, or what game she was playing. But one thing was clear. She was offering Maya a chance, a way to fight back against Blake in a way that might actually work. If you're in, we can help you, the woman continued, her eyes locking with Maya's. But if you're not, you're on your own. Blake won't stop until he has you under his control. And trust me, that's a place you don't want to be. Maya stared at her, the weight of the decision pressing down on her chest. She was trapped in a world she didn't fully understand, with enemies she couldn't predict and allies she didn't trust. But if there was any hope of surviving this, of stopping Blake once and for all, she knew she had to take the risk. Okay, Maya said, her voice firm. I'm in, but I need to know everything. The woman smiled slightly, a glint of approval in her eyes. Good, she said. Then let's get to work. Maya's mind swirled as she tried to process everything that had just happened. One moment, she was running for her life. And now, here she was, sitting across from a woman who claimed to be on her side. The room felt cold, the air thick with tension, and yet there was something about the woman's presence that commanded respect. She wasn't just someone who was offering Maya help. She was someone who had been waiting for this moment. What's your name? Maya finally asked, her voice steady but laced with curiosity. The woman's lips twitched slightly, but she didn't smile. Call me Harper, she said, leaning back in her chair, her hands resting on the desk in front of her. That's all you need to know right now. Maya wasn't sure what to make of that. There was no need for formalities here. Harper clearly had something much bigger at play. But as much as she wanted to ask more questions, Maya had learned the hard way that rushing things only led to more trouble. Okay, Harper, Maya said, trying to keep her voice calm despite the whirlwind of thoughts racing through her mind. You said you've been trying to take Blake down. What does that mean? Who are you really? Harper's gaze never wavered as she considered Maya's question. For a long moment, she didn't speak, and the silence felt heavier with each passing second. I'm not here to explain myself, Maya, Harper said at last. I'm here to give you a choice. You can join me, work with me, or you can go back out there and wait for Blake to make his next move. Either way, your life won't be the same after today. The weight of those words hit Maya harder than she expected. She wasn't naive. She knew that by involving herself with Harper, she was diving deeper into a dangerous world, one filled with shadows and hidden motives. But what choice did she have? Blake was already coming after her, and every move she made seemed to pull her further into his web. And what exactly do you want from me? Maya asked, her tone skeptical but resigned. I'm just a waitress. I'm not exactly cut out for whatever this is. Harper's eyes softened slightly, but only for a moment. She leaned forward slightly, her hands clasped in front of her on the desk. You've already shown that you're capable of standing up to Blake, Harper said. You took a risk by helping Trump. That alone shows you have guts. But what you don't have, yet, is the resources and knowledge to take him down. That's where I come in. Maya's brow furrowed. You want me to go after Blake? Not exactly. Harper's lips curled into a faint smile. I want you to help me gather intel on him. You'll be the one to move freely, to get close to him. Blake trusts people, but he doesn't trust anyone completely. I need someone like you. Someone who can slip in and out, unnoticed. Someone who can get the information we need. Maya shook her head, still processing what Harper was saying. And you think I can do that? Harper didn't flinch. I know you can. You've already shown you're resourceful enough. Now you just need the right training and tools. Maya sat back in her chair, considering the offer. She didn't know if she trusted Harper entirely, but one thing was certain. She couldn't keep running. And if this woman was offering her a chance to fight back against Blake, a chance to take him down once and for all, then she had no choice but to listen. I'm in, Maya said finally, her voice steady, her resolve beginning to harden. But what now? Harper's smile widened, this time with genuine approval. Now we prepare. We train. And we make sure Blake never sees you coming. The next few days felt like a blur. Maya was immersed in a world she had never known. One filled with tech, strategy, and countless hours of preparation. Harper was methodical, intense, and constantly pushing Maya to her limits. Every night, after hours of training, Maya's body ached, her mind exhausted, but she pushed through. She knew this wasn't just about learning new skills, it was about survival. They worked in secret, away from prying eyes. Harper provided her with everything she needed to gather information about Blake. Fake identities, encrypted phones, and surveillance equipment. Everything was set in place. It was up to Maya now to step into the lion's den. Harper's confidence in Maya was unwavering, but Maya wasn't so sure about herself. She had never done anything like this before. She had spent her days serving tables and trying to stay out of trouble, not pulling off covert operations. But as the days wore on, she began to feel a growing sense of purpose. This wasn't just about her survival anymore. This was about taking down someone who had ruined so many lives, someone who needed to be stopped. On the third night of her training, Harper sat down with her over coffee and looked at her seriously. "You're ready," Harper said, her tone firm. "Tomorrow, you'll make your first move." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. "Tomorrow?" she echoed, her voice barely audible. Harper nodded. "You'll need to make contact with one of Blake's associates. Get close to them. Find out what he's planning next." Maya's heart raced. It was happening. Everything she had been training for was leading to this moment. "Do you have any questions?" Harper asked, her gaze steady. Maya took a deep breath, trying to calm the nerves swirling inside her. "What if I can't do it? What if I get caught?" "You won't," Harper said, her voice unyielding. "You've got everything you need. Just stay focused and remember, trust no one but yourself." Maya nodded, even though she wasn't entirely convinced. Trusting herself was one thing, but trusting Harper and everyone involved in this operation was a different matter entirely. But for now, there was no turning back. The next morning, Maya stood outside a nondescript building in the heart of the city, her heart pounding in her chest. It was time to make her move, to step into the world of shadows and danger, to infiltrate Blake's world from the inside. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, her footsteps echoing on the pavement. Whatever came next, she was ready. At least, she hoped she was. Maya's heart was thudding in her chest as she walked down the street, her eyes darting around nervously. She hadn't felt this anxious in years, maybe ever. The mission she was about to undertake was the most dangerous thing she had ever done. There was no turning back now. She had made her choice, and she was committed. The building ahead of her was sleek and modern, a typical office space for one of Blake's many associates. She had done her homework, studied the layout, and memorized the names of everyone who worked inside. Blake's operations were vast, and getting close to one of his people was the first step in gathering valuable intel. Maya stopped in front of the building, taking a deep breath before pushing open the glass door. The cool air of the lobby greeted her, and for a moment, she felt like an intruder in a foreign world. The polished marble floors, the soft hum of fluorescent lights, the sharp-dressed men and women who worked here. It all felt like a universe that didn't belong to her. She had to keep her composure. She had to blend in. She walked up to the receptionist, a woman in her mid-20s with bright red hair and a bored expression. "Hi, I'm here to see Mr. Donovan," Maya said, her voice smooth, confident, but not too eager. The receptionist looked up from her computer, scanning Maya for a moment before typing something into the system. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked, her tone indifferent. Maya forced a smile, keeping her voice steady. "I was just told to come by. He's expecting me." The receptionist gave a slight nod, clearly uninterested in digging deeper. She pointed toward the elevator. "Fourth floor, suite 402. Maya gave a quick nod of thanks and turned toward the elevator. Her palms were clammy, but she wiped them against her jeans before pressing the button to go up. She had to be sharp. If she wanted to get through this, she couldn't let anything slip. Her mind was focused on the task ahead, but her thoughts kept racing, reminding her of everything that could go wrong. She knew Blake's associates weren't to be underestimated. They had eyes everywhere. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, and Maya stepped inside. As the elevator ascended, she tried to calm her nerves. The faint hum of the machine was the only sound, and Maya's reflection stared back at her from the polished metal walls. She looked normal, like just another person walking through the day. But beneath the surface, her heart was a storm of anxiety. When the elevator reached the 4th floor, the doors slid open, and Maya stepped into a sleek, open-concept office. She could hear the low murmur of voices, the click of keyboards, and the occasional ring of a phone. The scent of fresh coffee and printer ink filled the air. She walked past rows of desks, trying to act like she belonged. Everyone here seemed to be in a hurry, focused on their work, unaware of the storm that was about to hit them. At the end of the hallway, there was a door with a brass nameplate that read, "Mr. Donovan." Maya knocked softly, her heart hammering as she waited. A voice from inside called, "Come in." She opened the door and stepped into a well-appointed office. Mr. Donovan, a man in his 40s with salt and pepper hair and a sharp suit, sat behind a large mahogany desk, typing something into his laptop. He looked up when she entered, his expression neutral but curious. "Maya," he said, as if he was expecting her. "Come in, take a seat." Maya did as instructed, lowering herself into one of the chairs in front of his desk. She smiled, trying to keep the conversation casual, even though her mind was racing. Donovan was one of Blake's key men, someone who knew everything and everyone, but wasn't easily rattled. She had to be careful. "I'm here on behalf of some mutual friends," Maya said, her voice steady. "I was hoping we could talk about some upcoming business opportunities." Donovan raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. Business opportunities? And who, exactly, would those mutual friends be? Maya held his gaze, refusing to let her nerves show. "Let's just say they have an interest in your line of work." There was a pause, a beat of tension that hung between them. Donovan studied her closely, his piercing blue eyes scanning her face for any signs of weakness or hesitation. Finally, he nodded slowly. "All right, I'm listening." Maya's pulse quickened. This was it, the moment where everything could go south. But she had to push forward. If she hesitated, if she showed any doubt, it would be over. "We've heard a lot about the operations you're running, and let's just say we think there's a way to make things more profitable for all of us." She let the words hang in the air, watching Donovan closely. He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest. "You think I'm going to just hand over my operations to you? You're a bit naive if you think I'll just roll over." Maya felt the tension in the room escalate. This wasn't going how she'd planned. She had to think quickly, pivot. "I'm not asking you to hand anything over," she said, forcing her voice to stay calm. "I'm offering you an opportunity to expand. You've got a great operation going, but I know there are others looking to take your position. I'm here to help you stay ahead of the competition." Donovan studied her for a long moment, then leaned forward, his interest clearly piqued. "Go on." Maya didn't let up. "You don't want to be left behind when the game shifts, Mr. Donovan. Things are changing. The money's in the right places, but the right partnerships need to be made. I can connect you with people who have resources, people who can help you expand, take things to the next level." Donovan stared at her for a long moment, and Maya could feel the weight of his gaze, as if he was trying to gauge her every word. Finally, he nodded slowly. "All right, Maya, let's see what you've got." Maya's heart skipped a beat. She had done it. She had made the first connection. Now, it was time to keep the momentum going. As she stood up to leave, Donovan called after her. "I expect results. Don't waste my time." Maya forced herself to smile. "Of course, Mr. Donovan. You'll hear from me soon." As she left the office and headed toward the elevator, Maya's mind raced. She had done it. She had made it inside. But this was just the beginning. She was about to delve deeper into a world she barely understood, and the stakes had never been higher. As the elevator doors closed, she glanced at her reflection once again. She didn't look like the same person who had walked in just hours ago. She was someone new now, someone who was ready to fight for what was hers. Maya's pulse hadn't slowed since her meeting with Mr. Donovan. She had crossed a threshold, stepping deeper into a world she didn't fully understand. Every move from here on out would be more dangerous than the last, and the weight of what she was involved in was beginning to sink in. As she walked out of the building, Her mind raced with possibilities. Donovan's interest in her proposal was promising, but there was something about the way he had studied her, that cold calculation, that left her unsettled. Was he buying her story, or was he simply biding his time, waiting for her to slip up? The worst part was, she didn't know who she could trust anymore. Maya pulled her jacket tighter around her as she walked through the chilly afternoon. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, relieved to see Harper's name on the screen. She answered quickly, eager to share what had just happened. "Maya," Harper's voice came through, cool and collected as always. "How did it go?" Maya's chest tightened at the sound of Harper's voice. There was a certain authority there that reminded her of just how much was riding on her success. "I got in. Donovan's interested. I told him we could help him expand his operations, but I'm not sure how much he actually trusts me." Harper was silent for a moment before responding. "Good. Keep it that way. You don't want him to trust you too much, not yet. Donovan's one of the smarter ones, but he's also someone with a lot of enemies. He's cautious, which means he'll test you. Stay alert, Maya." "I will," Maya said, gripping her phone tighter. "What's next?" "Next, you need to make sure he doesn't turn on you. Watch his movements. Start gathering intel on him. And remember, everyone here has an agenda. Donovan isn't the only one working for Blake. His associates have their own ambitions." Maya let out a breath. She knew Harper was right. She couldn't afford to let her guard down, especially when everyone around her seemed to have their own plans. "What should I do if things go south with Donovan?" Maya asked, a lump forming in her throat. The anxiety of not knowing who was on her side was starting to creep back in. "Stay calm and stay focused. If he starts to get too close, you back off. I'll help you with the next move if that happens, but for now, keep pretending you're on his side." "Got it," Maya said, trying to keep her voice steady, though it trembled slightly. "I'll be careful." Harper's tone softened just a fraction. "You've got this, Maya. Just remember, there's no going back now. You're in the game. Make sure you play it right." The line went silent, and Maya was left alone with her thoughts again. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being pulled deeper into a web of lies. Blake was everywhere, his influence stretching out like threads in every direction. She didn't know how deep the web went, but she could feel it tightening around her. She had already made her first move. The next would be even more dangerous. That evening, Maya sat alone in her small apartment, going over everything. She had barely touched her dinner, her mind still consumed with thoughts of the day. She spread out the files Harper had given her, information on Donovan, his associates, and even Blake. The more she read, the more she realized how little she actually knew about what was truly going on. This wasn't just about taking down one man. This was a tangled web of criminal enterprises, political influence, and corruption that ran much deeper than she had ever imagined. As she sifted through the papers, one name kept popping up over and over: Lena Richards. Lena was an executive in Blake's organization, a woman whose rise to power had been both fast and seemingly uncontested. She had the connections, the intelligence, and the ruthlessness that made her one of the most feared players in the game. Maya didn't know much about Lena, but she knew one thing for certain. If Blake trusted her, then Lena was someone she needed to keep an eye on. The knock at her door startled her, and she jumped. She hadn't been expecting anyone, not at this hour. She got up cautiously, glancing through the peephole. It was Harper. Maya's heart skipped a beat as she opened the door. Harper stood there, her expression unreadable as always, but there was a hint of urgency in her eyes. "I need you to come with me," Harper said, her voice low. "We've got a problem." Maya followed Harper into the car, her stomach turning with a mix of nerves and confusion. Harper had only been this serious once before, when she'd warned Maya about the dangers of Blake's people. "We don't have much time," Harper said as they sped through the city streets. "Donovan is playing both sides. I knew he was working for Blake, but he's also got some other connections. People who don't take kindly to Blake's rise to power." Maya frowned, her mind racing. "What do you mean? What other connections?" Harper didn't respond right away, her focus on the road ahead. Finally, she spoke, her voice calm but edged with tension. "There's a faction of Blake's enemies that Donovan has been secretly working with. They've been trying to sabotage Blake for months. Donovan has been giving them information, leaking Blake's plans. But now, they're aware that someone is working from the inside. They're looking for the leak? Maya's blood ran cold. So they're coming for me? Harper's gaze flickered to her for a moment, then back to the road. Possibly. But they don't know who it is yet. If they find out you're the one working with us, they'll kill you without a second thought. Maya's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't realized just how high the stakes were until now. Everyone in this game was playing for their life, and one wrong move could be her last. We need to find out what Donovan knows. And we need to make sure we're not the ones being hunted, Harper continued. You've got a target on your back now, Maya. But I'll protect you, until we can take Blake down. Maya's mind was racing as they drove into the night. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about exposing the truth, about taking down Blake and everyone who had corrupted this system. But in order to do that, she needed to stay alive. And right now, that wasn't guaranteed. Maya sat in the back of the car, her mind racing with everything Harper had just told her. Donovan was playing both sides, feeding information to Blake's enemies while still working under Blake's thumb. That put Maya in an even more precarious position than she'd imagined. Not only was she trying to navigate the treacherous waters of Blake's empire, but now there were even more people who wanted her dead. And she had no idea who was pulling the strings behind the scenes. Harper drove in silence, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. The tension in the car was thick. Maya could feel it in the pit of her stomach, the growing sense of danger that seemed to follow her wherever she went. She had come so far, made it this far without being caught, but now she was facing the kind of threat that could undo everything. After a long, tense drive, Harper pulled the car into a hidden parking lot beneath a dimly lit building. Maya didn't recognize the area, but she trusted Harper. This was a place where they could regroup, a safe house of sorts where they could plan their next move. Harper shut off the engine and turned to Maya. We need to figure out who Donovan's contacts are. If he's leaking information to Blake's enemies, we can use that to our advantage. But we need to move fast. He's not the only one we're up against. We've got enemies in every direction. Maya nodded, but a gnawing doubt still lingered in her mind. Who could she trust? Harper had always been her ally, but there were so many layers to this situation now. Could Harper's motives be entirely pure? Was she truly on Maya's side? Or did she have her own agenda in this tangled mess? I know what you're thinking, Harper said, as if reading Maya's mind. You're wondering if I'm playing you too, aren't you? Maya's heart skipped a beat. I didn't say that. You didn't have to, Harper interrupted, her voice steady. I know you, Maya. You're cautious. But let me make one thing clear. I'm not your enemy. I'm here to make sure we both make it out of this alive. We've been through too much together for me to betray you. Maya swallowed, her mind still running 1,000 miles per minute. She wanted to believe Harper, but this game was filled with double crosses, and no one was exempt. Everyone had something to hide. Everyone had a price. We need to get to Donovan's contacts. He won't give up his secrets easily, Maya said, her voice steadying as she began to think more clearly. She had to focus. The sooner they figured out who Donovan was working with, the better. Harper's eyes narrowed. I have a lead. One of Donovan's associates has been moving in strange circles. He's been talking to people who are way above his pay grade, people who don't like Blake and aren't afraid to make their moves. I think we can get some answers from him. Maya's pulse quickened. How do we find him? We wait. He'll make a move soon, and when he does, we'll follow him. We can't risk going in blind. We need to see who else is involved. We'll have our opportunity. The plan was risky, but it was all they had. Maya leaned back in her seat, closing her eyes for a moment, trying to block out the noise in her head. She had made a deal with the devil when she decided to take on Blake, but now that she was in this deep, she had no choice but to keep pushing forward. Hours passed, and the stillness of the parking lot seemed to press in on Maya, making her feel like she was suffocating. Harper was scanning her phone, keeping a lookout, while Maya kept her eyes on the street, waiting for the person they were tracking to show up. Just as the clock struck midnight, a black SUV pulled into the lot. Maya's pulse skipped. This was it, the moment they had been waiting for. The man who stepped out of the SUV was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a sleek suit. He was someone Maya didn't recognize. but she could tell he wasn't someone to be trifled with. There was an air of confidence about him, an aura of power that seemed to radiate from him. Harper leaned forward, her eyes narrowed. That's Adam Sullivan. He's one of Donovan's right-hand men. If anyone knows what's going on, it's him. Maya nodded, watching as Adam walked towards a nearby building with a purposeful stride. He didn't seem to be worried about anyone following him, which meant he likely felt secure in whatever business he was conducting. Maya turned to Harper. We need to follow him. Harper's eyes were cold with determination. Follow closely, but don't get caught. We can't risk being seen. They both slid out of the car, moving quietly through the shadows. Maya's heart raced as they made their way down the alley, staying far enough behind to avoid detection but close enough to stay on Adam's tail. As they turned a corner, they saw Adam entering a private club, one of those exclusive, high-security places that catered to the rich and powerful. Harper pulled Maya back into the shadows. This is where things get complicated, she whispered. We can't just walk in there. We need a plan. Maya didn't hesitate. I'll go in. You stay here and keep an eye on things. Harper shot her a look of concern. Are you sure? Maya nodded, her resolve hardening. If we're going to get the answers we need, I have to be the one to get close to him. He won't talk to you. He'll talk to me. Harper gave a small, reluctant nod. All right, but be careful. Don't do anything stupid. Maya didn't have time to respond. She moved quickly toward the entrance of the club, her mind focused on one goal: getting close to Adam Sullivan and finding out what he knew about Donovan's double game. She had no idea what she was walking into, but the stakes were too high for her to back down now. Inside, the club was dark and luxurious, with the faint sound of jazz music drifting through the air. The room was filled with well-dressed men and women, their conversations drowned out by the clinking of glasses and the low murmur of voices. It felt like a world away from the harsh reality Maya had just left behind. She scanned the room, looking for Adam. He was sitting at a corner booth, talking to a well-dressed woman with dark sunglasses perched on her nose. From the way she carried herself, Maya could tell this woman was important. And judging by the look on Adam's face, this wasn't a casual conversation. It was serious. Maya walked toward them, pretending to be just another guest. She kept her head down, trying not to draw attention to herself. The last thing she needed was to be recognized. As she approached the booth, she caught snippets of their conversation. We need to be careful, Adam was saying. If Blake catches wind of this, we're done. We can't let him know we've been talking to her. Maya's blood ran cold. Her? Who were they talking about? She edged closer, just out of earshot, when suddenly a voice came from behind her. I wouldn't go any closer if I were you. Maya froze. She didn't need to turn around to know she was in trouble. Maya's heart pounded in her chest as the voice behind her sent a chill down her spine. She slowly turned around, trying to maintain her composure. A tall, slender man stood there, his dark eyes fixed on her. He was dressed in a black suit, his presence unnerving, almost predatory. His smirk didn't reach his eyes, and the way he watched her felt like he was sizing her up, looking for a weakness. Maya forced herself to speak, though her voice wavered slightly. I'm just trying to get a drink, she said, trying to sound casual, like she belonged in this world of high rollers and secretive deals. She was far from it, but in moments like these, blending in was the only option. The man raised an eyebrow, his smile widening into something colder. You don't look like you're here for the cocktails, he said, his voice smooth but with a dangerous edge. I don't know what you're looking for, but it's not here. You should go before things get complicated. Maya stood her ground, refusing to let fear show on her face. She'd come this far, and she wasn't backing down now. I'm just here to talk to someone, she replied, her eyes scanning the room for a way out. She had to stay focused. Adam Sullivan was just a few feet away. She couldn't afford to lose him. The man chuckled softly, but it wasn't a friendly sound. You think you're the only one here with a purpose? I'd suggest you reconsider. This place is dangerous for people like you. Maya's mind raced. He knew. Somehow, he knew why she was here. She couldn't let him intimidate her. I'll be fine, she said, lifting her chin defiantly. I'm not scared. The man's smile faded, and for a brief moment, his eyes hardened. You should be. With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Maya exhaled, the tension in her body slowly unwinding, but only slightly. She'd just been warned, and it wasn't a warning she could ignore. She had to be more careful now. There were eyes everywhere. Adam Sullivan's booth was still occupied, but the woman he was with had left, slipping out into the crowd. Maya saw her opportunity. She made her way over to the booth, her steps slow but deliberate, trying to act like she was just another guest looking to socialize. She had to get close to Adam without drawing too much attention to herself. As she neared the booth, Adam looked up, his eyes narrowing when he saw her. He hadn't expected her to get so close. Maya didn't flinch, meeting his gaze with the same intensity. She had no choice but to push forward. "Can I help you?" Adam asked, his voice now wary, but his body language still exuding the confidence that made him such a dangerous player in this world. Maya smiled, letting her guard down just enough to seem approachable. "I think we have some mutual acquaintances," she said, sliding into the booth across from him without waiting for an invitation. "Maybe we should talk?" Adam's eyes flicked around the room, making sure no one was paying attention, before he leaned back, his posture stiff. "Who are you? Really? And how do you know about me?" Maya held her ground. "Let's just say I have my sources. I know what you're doing here. I know about Donovan, and I know you're not exactly playing on Blake's side anymore." Adam's expression darkened, and for a moment, Maya saw a flicker of something dangerous in his eyes. "You're treading on dangerous ground," he warned her. "This isn't something you want to get involved in." "I'm already involved," Maya replied, her voice steady. "I don't have a choice anymore." Adam studied her for a long moment, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. Then, with a resigned sigh, he leaned forward, his tone dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You're right about one thing. You're already in this. But if you want to survive, you need to get out. There's no way you're going to win against Blake. He's too powerful, too connected. You're just a pawn in a game you don't understand." Maya's pulse quickened at his words, but she didn't let her fear show. "And what about you? Are you playing for Blake, or against him?" Adam's lips curled into a half-smile. "I'm playing for whoever offers the best deal. Blake is a dangerous man, but his enemies are worse. You don't know what he's capable of. You think you can bring him down, but I've seen it all. No one gets out of this game alive unless they know when to quit." Maya's eyes locked onto his. She wasn't going to back down, not now. "I'm not quitting. I've come too far." Adam laughed, the sound bitter. "You're either brave or stupid. But I'll give you this, at least you've got guts." Maya didn't respond, not immediately. She was processing everything he had just said, trying to make sense of it all. If Adam was right, then the stakes were higher than she could have imagined. Blake wasn't just some corporate magnate. He was a force, and those who tried to take him down ended up disappearing. But Maya couldn't back down now. She'd come this far, and there was no turning back. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but they were still scattered. She needed more information, more allies. If she was going to take down Blake and everyone who stood with him, she needed to act fast. She leaned in closer, her voice soft but resolute. "I don't need you to tell me what's impossible. I need you to help me stop Blake." Adam didn't respond immediately. His gaze shifted, and Maya saw the conflict in his eyes. He was considering her words. Then, finally, he spoke. "All right," he said, his voice low. "I'll help you. But you need to understand something. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this because Blake is too dangerous. And if you're going to survive, you need to understand that you're not just fighting him. You're fighting everyone who wants a piece of his empire." Maya's heart raced as she processed his words. She had just gained an ally, but the cost of that alliance was higher than she could fathom. There was no turning back. She was in deeper than ever, and the danger was only beginning. As Maya walked back to the car, the weight of what she had just agreed to pressed heavily on her. She had a new ally, but Adam Sullivan was a man who lived by his own rules. He wasn't someone she could fully trust, not yet. But if he could help her take down Blake, it might be worth the risk. Harper was waiting for her, her eyes sharp as she observed Maya's expression. "What happened?" she asked. Maya didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took a deep breath, steadying herself. I made a deal. Adam's going to help us. Harper's brow furrowed. You trust him? Maya didn't hesitate. I don't trust anyone, but right now, we need him. Harper nodded, her lips pressed in a thin line. All right, let's just hope he doesn't betray us. Maya's mind was racing as she sat in the back seat of the car, Harper's eyes flicking to her in the rearview mirror every few moments. The tension in the air was palpable. Everything had just shifted. Adam Sullivan, a man with his own hidden agenda, had agreed to help her, but Maya couldn't shake the nagging feeling that she was walking a razor-thin line between survival and destruction. Harper finally broke the silence, her voice low but sharp. Are you sure about this? Adam Sullivan? He's no saint, Maya. Maya glanced out the window, watching the city lights blur by. She had seen too much already to be naive. The world they were navigating was built on lies, power plays, and people who would sell you out without a second thought if it meant saving themselves. I don't trust him, she admitted, but we need him. He's the only one who can help us get close enough to Blake. Harper's grip on the steering wheel tightened. And if he's playing us? You know how dangerous this is, right? If he's really trying to double-cross you? Maya didn't want to think about the consequences of that. She had made her choice. She had to see it through. There was no going back now. If he tries to betray me, I'll deal with it. But right now, he's the only one who has the information we need. Harper stayed silent for a moment, her eyes focused on the road. Just don't forget what kind of game you're playing. You're not dealing with normal people anymore. You're in the lion's den, and those lions don't care who gets eaten. The car pulled into a quiet, upscale neighborhood, and Maya's nerves flared. This was Adam's turf, a place where the wealthy and powerful came to live their illusions of safety and control. But behind every gated door and behind every glitzy facade, there were people like Adam, lurking in the shadows, playing dangerous games. Harper parked the car in front of a nondescript house. It looked simple enough, but Maya could feel the weight of power behind the door. They both stepped out, their shoes clicking on the pavement as they walked toward the entrance. Maya's pulse quickened. She wasn't sure what she was walking into, but she was determined to keep her focus. She had come this far, and there was no turning back. Adam answered the door. He was dressed casually, but the way he held himself still commanded respect. The cool, controlled demeanor that had characterized their first meeting was still very much present. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. Come in, he said, stepping aside to let them through. The inside of the house was sleek and modern, filled with sharp lines and minimalist decor. There were no unnecessary distractions here, just cold, calculating elegance. The kind of place someone like Adam would thrive in. Maya wasn't fooled by the decor. She knew the real power was hidden beneath the surface, in the people and the alliances that were formed in places like this. Once inside, Adam gestured for them to sit on the leather couch in the living room. Harper took a seat immediately, crossing her arms, while Maya remained standing for a moment, her eyes scanning the room. She was wary. Every corner could hide a hidden microphone or a set of eyes that were always watching. Adam wasted no time. I'm sure you've got questions, and I don't intend to waste your time. You want Blake's empire to crumble, and I want to make sure it does. But we're not going to do it by playing nice. Maya's eyes narrowed. What exactly are you offering me, Adam? I'm offering you the truth, he said, his voice calm. Everything you think you know about Blake and his organization. About the people who work for him, the deals he's made, the people he's betrayed, that's just the tip of the iceberg. I can help you uncover what's really going on, but it's not going to be easy. And it's not going to be pretty. Maya's fingers tightened into fists. This was the moment of truth. She had to decide if she was going to trust him completely or if she was walking into another trap. You keep saying the truth, she said slowly. What is it that I don't know? Adam leaned back in his chair, his eyes scanning her face, as if weighing how much he should reveal. Blake's empire is built on more than just business deals. He's involved in things that are much darker, things that even the highest officials in this city are too afraid to talk about. I know because I've been part of it, but I got out before things went too far. Maya's breath caught. She'd heard rumors about Blake's dealings, but she never imagined it went this deep. He wasn't just a corporate kingpin. He was tangled in something far more dangerous. Why help me? Maya asked, trying to keep her voice steady. If you really want to bring him down, why not do it yourself? Adam's gaze turned colder. I'm not the hero in this story, Maya. I'm just a man trying to protect what's left of his soul. Blake doesn't leave anyone standing once he's done with them. If you want to take him down, you'll need more than just information. You'll need muscle, influence, and above all, control. Maya's mind was spinning. It was clear Adam had his own reasons for being in this fight, but it wasn't just a desire for revenge or justice. He had something to lose too. Everyone did. What's the next step? Harper asked, her voice tight with impatience. We need to start gathering allies, Adam replied, his tone shifting to one of grim determination. People on the inside who can give us access to Blake's operations, his finances, and his connections. And there's one person who can help us get there. Maya raised an eyebrow. Who? Adam leaned forward. Sophia Carmichael. She's one of Blake's closest confidants. If we can get her to flip, we'll have access to everything. Maya felt a flicker of recognition. Sophia Carmichael. The name echoed in her mind. She had heard of her. A powerful woman in Blake's inner circle, a deal-maker who was said to have the ear of everyone who mattered. Convincing her to flip would be no small feat. It was like trying to bring down a kingpin by taking out their queen. Why would she help us? Maya asked. Adam's lips curled into a faint, calculating smile. Because she wants out. And I know exactly how to make her see that working with us is her best option. Maya didn't have time to question Adam's confidence. They were moving forward, whether she was ready or not. The plan was set into motion, and now they had to gather information on Sophia. Maya had no illusions about the danger ahead. The closer they got to Blake's empire, the more people would start to notice them. She exchanged a quick glance with Harper. They were on the edge now. One wrong move could be their last. The air was thick with tension as Maya and Harper stood in the dimly lit cafe, waiting for their contact to arrive. It wasn't the kind of place you'd expect a deal to be made, but in this game, appearances were often deceiving. The cafe, tucked away on a quiet street, was a hub for those who wanted to remain unseen, away from the prying eyes of the public and the ever-watchful surveillance cameras that monitored every corner of the city. This was the kind of place where deals were sealed with a handshake and a whispered promise, but it was also where lives could be easily destroyed. Maya glanced at her watch for the 5th time in as many minutes. They were on a strict timeline. Adam had promised Sophia Carmichael would meet them, but trust was in short supply, and Maya had learned never to rely on promises alone. Harper shifted in her seat, her eyes scanning the entrance. You sure this is the right place? If she's not here soon, we're walking. Maya nodded, keeping her gaze fixed on the door. She was trying to stay calm, but inside, a storm of thoughts was swirling. Sophia Carmichael. The name alone carried weight. As one of Blake's most trusted allies, Sophia had access to the heart of Blake's operations. If Maya could persuade her to flip, it could be the key to breaking Blake's empire apart. But there was no telling what kind of game Sophia was playing. Everyone had their own motivations, and in this world, trust was something that had to be earned, never given. I don't like this either, Maya said softly, but we don't have a choice. If Adam says she's the key, then we go with it. Harper let out a skeptical grunt. If we end up being double-crossed, I'm not sticking around to clean up the mess. Before Maya could respond, the door to the cafe opened, and a woman stepped inside. She was tall, poised, and dressed in an elegant, yet understated manner. A black jacket over a silk blouse, the kind of look that spoke volumes without saying a word. It was a look that said she was someone who didn't need to shout to be heard. Sophia Carmichael. Maya's pulse quickened. This was it. The woman who could change everything. Sophia's eyes swept the room, briefly locking onto Maya and Harper before she made her way toward their table. Her expression was unreadable, but there was an intensity in her gaze that made it clear she wasn't here to waste anyone's time. She took a seat without waiting for an invitation. Her gaze flicked over to Harper, who eyed her warily but didn't make a move. Maya leaned forward, keeping her voice steady. Maya, she said. We've been waiting for you. Sophia smiled, but it was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I know who you are. Adam sent you, didn't he? Maya nodded. He did. He said you'd be able to help us. We need your help to bring Blake down. Sophia's expression didn't change. She leaned back in her chair, folding her arms across her chest as she appraised Maya. I don't work for free, and I don't make deals unless I'm certain it benefits me. Maya didn't hesitate. We can offer you something Blake never will: freedom. You've been his right hand for years, but we both know you're not getting any younger. What's the real cost of working for him? You're more valuable to him alive than dead, but how much longer do you think that will last? Blake doesn't care about anyone. Not really. But we can change that. Sophia studied Maya for a moment, and then her lips curved into a knowing smile. You're bold, I'll give you that. But you're missing the bigger picture. You think Blake is the only problem in this city? There are bigger forces at play here than just him. He's a puppet, just like everyone else. If you're looking to take him down, you'll need to look beyond him. Maya's mind raced. What do you mean? You think someone else is pulling the strings? Sophia's gaze flicked toward the door, as if making sure no one was listening in. Then, in a low voice, she continued, You've been focused on the wrong person. Blake's power is just the surface. If you really want to tear his empire apart, you need to understand who's financing him, who's making the real moves behind the curtain. Maya leaned in closer. Who? Sophia's eyes gleamed with a mixture of amusement and something darker. I can't tell you everything, not yet. But I will tell you this. You're playing a game that you're not prepared for. Blake is a small fish in a much larger pond. And if you're not careful, you'll find yourself in over your head. Harper shifted uncomfortably in her seat, clearly not liking the direction of the conversation. We're here for information, not riddles. Can you help us or not? Sophia ignored Harper's tone and turned her full attention back to Maya. I can help you, but it's going to cost you. And you'll need to trust me when I say that the price isn't one you're ready to pay. You think you're doing the right thing, but the truth is, there's more to this than you can possibly imagine. Maya's thoughts were spinning. She had come here for one thing, an ally to take down Blake. But now she was faced with a larger, more complicated web of lies and deceit. She needed answers, but Sophia wasn't making it easy. I don't have time for games, Maya said, her voice firm. If you're offering help, then let's get to the point. Sophia studied her for a moment, then nodded. Fine, I'll help you. But understand this, taking down Blake is just the beginning. You'll need to play your cards right, or you'll end up like everyone else who's crossed the line. Dead, or worse. Maya's heart beat faster. What's the catch? Sophia's lips curled into a slow smile. The catch is that I'm not the only one you need to worry about. If you want to survive this, you'll need to figure out who your real enemies are, and trust no one. The conversation ended there. Sophia stood, her eyes lingering on Maya for a moment longer than necessary, before she turned and walked out of the cafe without a word. Maya was left staring after her, her mind reeling. She had thought she knew what she was up against, but now she realized how little she understood. The pieces were all there, but they didn't fit together. Yet, Harper didn't say anything as they walked out of the cafe. She didn't need to. They both knew the stakes had just gotten much higher. They were no longer just fighting Blake. Now, they were fighting a war they didn't fully understand. And the enemy was everywhere. The weight of Sophia's cryptic warning hung in the air long after she left the cafe. Maya's mind was racing, piecing together the fragments of information she had received. Blake was a puppet. The idea lingered like an insidious thought, challenging everything she thought she knew. Who was pulling his strings? And more importantly, who else was involved? Harper's sharp voice broke through Maya's thoughts. You're not seriously going to trust her, are you? Maya glanced over at her friend. Harper's arms were crossed tightly, a clear sign that she wasn't happy with the turn of events. I don't trust anyone, Harper, Maya said quietly. But Sophia knows something. I can feel it. She's got a stake in all of this. And if we want to take down Blake, we need to understand the bigger picture. Harper frowned. We already have a target, Blake. Why go after shadows? We don't even know who the hell these bigger players are. Maya stared at the cafe door, as if expecting Sophia to reappear with answers. But there was nothing. Because Sophia's right, Maya replied, her voice cold. Blake isn't the end of this. If we take him down without understanding who's behind him, We'll just be setting up the next dictator to take his place. Harper let out a frustrated sigh. This is getting messier by the minute. I'm not sure how much more of this I can take, Maya. We're playing a dangerous game here, and I don't know if we're ready for the fallout. Maya turned to face her. We don't have a choice. We're in this deep, and the only way out is to keep moving forward. We have to find out who's pulling Blake's strings, and then we make them all pay. The drive back to Adam's place was quiet, both women lost in their thoughts. Maya's mind was on one thing, Sophia's warning. There was something she wasn't telling them, something that made this all even more dangerous than she had originally imagined. As much as Maya hated to admit it, Sophia was right. The world they were navigating was far more complex than a simple power struggle. There were forces at play far beyond their control. When they arrived at Adam's house, the silence between them felt oppressive. Adam was already waiting for them, his posture casual, but Maya could see the calculating look in his eyes. He had been watching them, waiting for the next move. Maya wasted no time. Sophia's on board, but she didn't give us much. She hinted at something bigger than Blake, something we haven't seen yet, and I think we need to follow that lead. Adam's lips quirked into a small smile. Sophia's always been an enigma, but she's right about one thing. Blake is a pawn in a much larger game, but getting to the heart of that game won't be easy. You'll need to gather more allies. Harper stepped forward, her skepticism written all over her face. Allies? You're still talking about this like we're playing chess, Adam. This isn't a game. These people will kill us if we're not careful. Maya could feel the tension in the room, the weight of their next move pressing down on them. She didn't blame Harper for being nervous. This was far from the simple revenge story she had originally thought it would be. But Maya wasn't backing down. She couldn't. Too many people had already been hurt because of Blake and the web of corruption he had spun. Who else can we trust? Maya asked, her voice steady. We need to find those who can get us closer to the heart of this. Someone who can tell us what Sophia was hinting at. Adam seemed to consider it for a moment, tapping his fingers on the table. There's someone, he said, finally breaking the silence. But you won't like it. Maya's gaze locked onto his. Who? Carmen Hayes, he replied, a flicker of something, distrust, perhaps, crossing his face. She's a high-ranking player in the city's underground network. She's got information on Blake, and more importantly, she knows the power brokers in this town who are really calling the shots. If anyone can shed light on what's going on, it's her. Maya's stomach dropped. Carmen Hayes was notorious. She had a reputation for being ruthless, and she played both sides. No one ever knew if she was a friend or an enemy until it was too late. Trusting Carmen was a risk, but Maya knew that sometimes, to expose the truth, you had to get your hands dirty. If we're going to approach Carmen, we need a solid plan, Maya said, her voice steady despite the unease creeping into her chest. Do we have one? Adam nodded, his face serious. I'll set up a meeting, but understand this, Carmen doesn't do favors. She'll want something in return, and it's never cheap. You need to be prepared to give up more than you're comfortable with. Maya swallowed, her heart racing. We don't have a choice. If Carmen is the key to this, then we'll make it work. The room fell silent as the weight of their next move settled over them. Maya felt a mix of dread and determination. This wasn't just about taking down Blake anymore. It was about unearthing a conspiracy that could reach farther than she could possibly imagine. Carmen Hayes was the next step, but the question remained. Would she be an ally, or would she be another obstacle in their path? The next morning, Adam contacted Carmen. The arrangement was simple. Maya and Harper would meet Carmen at a secluded location, a warehouse on the edge of town. It was clear that Adam was trying to keep their interaction under wraps. The fewer people who knew about it, the better. As they drove to the location, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The city had a way of closing in on you when you least expected it, and the deeper they dug into Blake's operations, the more dangerous everything seemed. When they arrived, Carmen was already waiting. She stood with her arms crossed, her sharp eyes assessing Maya and Harper as they approached. Her presence was intimidating. There was no warmth in her demeanor, only the cold calculation of someone who had seen it all and wasn't easily impressed. Maya extended her hand, but Carmen didn't take it. She just stared at Maya for a moment, sizing her up. You're the one trying to take down Blake, she said, her voice low and steady. Maya nodded. We need your help. Carmen didn't respond immediately. She took a step back, her eyes flicking to Harper before returning to Maya. You want Blake gone? Fine. But it's going to cost you more than you think. Maya straightened, meeting her gaze. We're prepared to pay whatever it takes. We need the truth, Carmen. The whole truth. Carmen's lips curled into a slight smile, but there was no warmth in it. We'll see, she said. But be careful, Maya. You're treading on dangerous ground. Not everyone who helps you will want to walk away alive. Maya stood in the cold, dimly lit warehouse, the silence pressing in around her. Carmen Hayes had said nothing since their exchange. The room was filled with the faint hum of machinery in the background, but all Maya could hear was the pounding of her own heart. This was it. The final piece of the puzzle was in Carmen's hands, and with it, the key to bringing Blake down. Carmen's eyes flicked over to Harper, who stood at Maya's side, arms crossed tightly across her chest. Harper was the more skeptical of the two, and Maya could feel her tension in the air. So, what's it going to be, Carmen? Maya asked, her voice steady, though her mind was racing. We're ready. We've done what you asked. Now, it's your turn. Carmen's lips curled into a slow, almost imperceptible smile. You really think you've been playing this game, don't you? Maya frowned. What do you mean? Carmen stepped closer, her movements calculated, each step echoing in the quiet warehouse. The game isn't what you think it is. You're all just pawns. You've been fed lies, played for fools. Blake isn't the mastermind here. Neither is Sophia. And certainly not me. Harper's eyes narrowed. Who's pulling the strings, then? Who's been setting us up? Maya's stomach twisted as she listened to Carmen, her words striking a nerve deeper than expected. The woman was always calculating, but there was something different now. A new level of danger, like a veil had been lifted, revealing something far more sinister. It's always been about control, Carmen said softly, her voice dark. The people you're chasing, they're just tools. Do you really think this is about money, power, or politics? It's about control over the one thing that everyone wants to own in this world, information. Maya's heart skipped a beat. Information? What does that mean? Carmen took a step back, her gaze never leaving Maya's. You've been so focused on taking down Blake that you missed the true players. All of this, Blake's empire, the lies, the betrayals, has been about one thing. Controlling the flow of information, the data, the secrets, the power of knowing everything about everyone. Blake was always just a middleman. He was expendable. Maya felt the ground beneath her shift. She had known it was bigger than Blake. But this was something she hadn't even considered. If the game was about information, then everything they had worked for, everything they had sacrificed, had been part of someone else's larger plan. What are you saying? Maya asked, her voice barely a whisper. Carmen met her gaze head-on. You were set up, Maya. Every move you've made, every person you've trusted, every alliance you've built, was orchestrated. And guess who's been behind it all? A cold shiver ran down Maya's spine as the truth hit her like a punch to the gut. Adam, Carmen said, her eyes glinting with satisfaction. Your so-called ally. He's the one pulling the strings, and now, he's going to use you to finish the job. He's the one who set Blake up to fall, and he's the one who set you up, too. The words reverberated in Maya's mind like a shockwave. Adam? The man she had trusted, the one who had been her ally since the beginning, the one who had given her the tools and the support she needed. No, Maya's voice trembled, though she tried to steady it. You're lying. Adam wouldn't. I don't lie, Maya, Carmen interrupted, her voice cold. Adam has been playing both sides. He's been feeding you just enough information to get you moving, keeping you on his side. But the moment you got too close to the truth, he was always going to turn on you. He's not interested in bringing Blake down. He's interested in something much bigger. Harper stepped forward, her fists clenched. If this is true, then why haven't you done anything? Why are you helping us? Carmen's eyes flicked to Harper, then back to Maya. Because, while Adam's been playing you, he's been playing me too. But I have my own game to finish. Blake's downfall is just a side effect. You need me to take him down, and I need you to take Adam down." The air felt thick with tension. Maya's mind was in a blur, trying to process everything. Adam, the man who had promised to help her, who had led her to believe they were on the same side, was the one who had been pulling the strings all along. "What does he want?" Maya asked, her voice hoarse. "Why do this?" Carmen smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant smile. "Power. Adam is a player in a larger game. He wants to control the flow of information that runs through this city, through this country. And Blake? Blake was just a stepping stone, a temporary distraction while Adam put his real plan into motion." Maya felt as though the ground had been pulled out from under her. Every step she had taken, every decision she had made, had been a part of Adam's strategy. She had been a pawn in his game, just like everyone else. "So, what now?" Maya asked, her voice steady despite the chaos swirling in her mind. "What do you want from me?" Carmen's smile widened. "Now, we finish what we started. You want to bring Blake down? Fine. But you'll need my help to make sure Adam doesn't walk away with all the power when this is over." Maya clenched her fists. The pieces were starting to come together, but the truth was more complicated, more dangerous than she could have imagined. She had trusted Adam with everything, and now she was left with a bitter taste of betrayal. But Carmen was right about one thing. If she wanted to survive this, she couldn't just focus on Blake anymore. She had to bring Adam down, too. He had manipulated her, used her to get to this point, and now it was time to turn the tables. Maya turned to Harper, who was still processing the betrayal. She could see the doubt in her friend's eyes, but also the resolve. They weren't going to let Adam win. They couldn't. "We take him down together," Maya said, her voice cold with resolve. "All of it. Blake, Adam, everything. This ends now." Harper nodded. "Let's finish this." Carmen watched them, her expression unreadable. "I'll give you what you need. But remember, this game doesn't have a winner. Only survivors." The shocking truth has been revealed. Maya's most trusted ally was never who he seemed to be. Now, the game has changed, and the final battle looms. Will Maya be able to defeat both Blake and Adam, or will she be consumed by the web of lies they've spun? Subscribe to follow the thrilling conclusion of Maya's journey and leave your thoughts below, because the end is closer than you think.